that happens here. I just provide a mapping which says if you're calling this leader action and somebody issues a GET request against it, return the value. There's a couple of other bits and pieces going on. The set user arg captures the current user of the current session and gives that to you. So if I'm a maintenance programmer and I come to this piece of code and I need to modify the leaderboard in some way, I can immediately find the right place to go to edit that code. Because it's pattern matched, it also means that you can make your life a lot easier. So if I return to the original code, the piece of code that I skipped over, one of the things that I want to do is I don't want to be looking up the event every time in all the different pieces of business logic. So what I can do is I can overwrite the existing definitions from my well plugin. For example, the leader definition down at the bottom. And I'm pattern matching against any JSON document that has a role, a well, and a command with leader. And I'm inserting the event into the arguments that it's going to get. And then this.parent pulls the original one. This.parent is the one that you saw before. This one here. As far as the calling code is concerned, it has no idea that the event is being injected in that way. It really doesn't matter. And it means you can layer all sorts of different logic on top of your code and the things that you're doing. Caching systems, permission systems, all that sort of stuff. Really, really easy to add to, because all you have to do is pattern match. So, the other nice thing that this structure gives you, and you can see this on, the live system. So this is a login to the virtual machine that's running the live app. What I've said is I want to look at all the logs that it's generating, but I'm only interested in the actions that this well plugin is performing. So remember, the structure is a standard JSON document. It does something, gives me something back. I can see exactly all of those actions because they're tracked here in the logs. I can see what goes in to a particular command. In this case, the command here is members, and I can see what comes out. And because in a live situation you have hundreds of these, you can track them by a tracking ID. And you can slice and dice the logs as well in all sorts of different ways. You can go down to the level of database to see database operations, or much higher to see caching and permissions operations, that sort of stuff. But the key thing is that it's really, really easy to know where to look when you want to do something. It also means that when you start to build your app, the approach that you take is, instead of a traditional one where you're breaking it down into a series of objects and thinking about the relationships between objects, you're thinking about things in a dynamic way. So you think about what happens, what are you supposed to be doing. It's more of a use case driven approach than a object modeling approach. But in reality, that tends to match the way that we write code anyway, because we're trying to do things. We're not trying to create inaccurate representations of the world. We need to get stuff done. Like I said, this code is up on GitHub. It'll run right out of the box. It's really, really easy to follow the logic and see what happens. It's a great place to start when you're thinking about, I want to build an app it's more of a traditional app. And you just want to get stuff done when you're migrating from something like Django or something like Ruby on Rails into the Node.js world. And that is pretty much that. Yeah, yeah, it's you have to naming things is really hard, right? You kind of picking domains where you can generate names is kind of an easy trick, right? So one place that I worked used all the names of all the islands around the island of Ireland for all their servers. Which scales quite well actually, it's several hundred. But I studied philosophy in a former life, so I'm a philosopher.
So Seneca is being used in production?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and it's actually nearly 3 years old at this stage, and it's gone through several revisions. Because Airform is a consulting company, we built it for ourselves first and foremost, and we found it really useful to do boring stuff. Right? Boring stuff that clients have to do. I mean, some of the projects that you can do with Node are really, really cool. One of the ones we did recently involved a peer-to-peer BitTorrent network, transferring gigabytes of data, and all the cool stuff that Dominic was talking about streams and all this sort of stuff. Node really shines there. But in other cases, people just want to build a mobile app, and you just need something a simple structure to put that in place.
If you were to bring it, would you recommend to people you dive straight into it? So not just using Express there, is it like a stepping stone into it, or would you say, no, I'm just going to send it straight away?
So you can build an app with Express pretty much straight away. Right? But it's the same problem that you have on the front end if you just use jQuery, because you end up with spaghetti code. So Express accepts these middleware functions that define what you want to do, but you end up with a whole bunch of middleware functions and global variables, coordinating things, that sort of stuff. So you can get quite far with vanilla Express, but once you start needing maintainability, once you start needing scalability in the code itself, in terms of maintaining the code, you need to put some structure around it. Seneca isn't the only one. Right? There's a couple of other ones in the Node.js ecosystem that are attempting to solve those problems. Some of them have different takes. So Seneca doesn't really care about dependencies or any of that sort of stuff. You're just supposed to layer them on yourselves. Other ones are very careful about dependency management. Absolutely.
Does it handle the front end as well?
Sorry?
Templating or any front end?
No. So I think in order to write something useful, you have to be very, very strict about the boundaries. It doesn't do templating, it doesn't do any front-end stuff. It doesn't have any actual specific knowledge of the web context at all. So it's useful for writing. Bash processes, all that sort of stuff as well. It only knows about requests and responses if you happen to pass them in as arguments that it can then act on. Now, for authorization, you do have to have some knowledge of that you're in a web context. I think that in the Node.js ecosystem, there isn't really an approach like Ruby on Rails, let's say, where we solve all problems and it's prepackaged. And I don't know if any of you have read the kind of famous, was it Omakaze blog post? Have you seen that one? Apparently, it's like a really, really expensive restaurants where there's a set menu and that's it. You just get one thing, and whichever night you go on, that's it. It's the thing that you get. Node is all about picking and composing specific modules and specific things that you need. So there is a learning curve finding out which ones are the right ones to use. But it does mean that your code base is really, really small, and once you get used to it, you can be very, very effective. And you aren't caught out by magic and unintended consequences.
So can you use it for creating a RESTful API?
Yes, so there are a couple of modules that do that actually. and you actually saw the you actually saw the kind of shorthand code for that here, right, where you attach actions to HTTP endpoints. But this is ultimately just a convenience. You can do this manually yourself. But it does lend itself, absolutely, to that particular mode, because a lot of HTTP JSON REST APIs consist of JSON going in and JSON going out.
So when you have a get, but you send this JSON object, does that come through? Is that in the body of the get?
Right, so I cheat, right? I look for any query parameters in the URL
right.
and I turn them into a JSON object.
Right.
But
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's you have to convert. It's a type conversion essentially.
Well, it's kind of analogous to, I mean, like option arguments on when you run a process as well.
Exactly.
Roughly.
So do you mean that's kind of like an AJAX call when you say HTTP JSON stuff?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. The other thing that I wanted to do with that example app was it's also a good demonstration of the Sencha framework, which I didn't dwell on much because obviously this is a Node.js meetup, not a front-end meetup. But building complex JavaScript applications usually involves complex front-end code. And if you look at this application in GitHub, you'll see that the volume of front-end code is higher. Say there's about 2 times, 3 times as much front-end code as there is back-end code. The back-end is normally, because Node, much easier to do. The front-end has a lot of state management. You have to worry about usability. It gets very tricky. Sencha is like Java Swing or something like that. Very steep learning curve. But it is worth it because it does make your life a lot easier. And one of the things that I want to do is show how you could integrate a Sencha-based front end and a Node.js backend.
Sorry,
Okay, we'll have 1 or 2 more.
so for instance, if you wanted to use something like Socket.io, you have to have a
Yes, you could, yes.
Seneca plugin, or
Yes, it does support it, and I'm not going to attempt live coding now to set it up, but there is a Seneca plugin for administration, which will give you a live log feed using something like that. So yeah, if you're building something like that for Node.js and you don't support WebSockets, you're kind of missing the point. There are no WebSockets in this, and I mean it's obvious that the next step up for this application would be that the leaderboard and the current members will be alive. You'd use WebSockets to feed those through. At the moment, the app, if you look at it, polls every 10 seconds to get the latest data. But that's for pedagogical reasons. So I think I'm going to bail out and hand you over to pizza. Thank you very much.